So I'll clip the previous into this moment right now where my mic has come on. Now that I'm being listened to, I'll go ahead and explain again that since yesterday we had some technical difficulties, I'm going to pick up where it got a little bit tricky. So I can explain how to set up the latter portion of this AI and how to use it in combination where the AI places images over this geometry and then also does a final render pass on the end result. It's 65 degrees here in Florida, and that's enough to give me a cold. So I'm going to put my all into this and make this short, sweet, and fun. So here in the 3D view, I've just set up a grid array. And what I'm going to do is actually go from the top view and make sure that I call out the ones that are in view. So for example, if I go over to this section here, I'll just go to a top view, zoom in, hit tab, and select these faces that I want the AI to apply over. So we'll do this set of 4 first. And I'll go ahead and type in a prompt for the concept art here on the plugin for dream textures that I showed in the last video how to set up. So right here, I'll go ahead and type in a prompt such as aerial view of towns in a mountain region. And we can go further, sort of explain dark purple waters or dark purple lakes and heavy tree density. And we can do high detail. We'll leave it at that, short and sweet. Now, for the advanced settings here, I went over this a little bit before, but I like to use Euler Ancestral Discrete for the scheduler. Starting off at 25 steps is fine, and we can bump that up later. So with those settings, all good. Inputs, we can just do depth because there's no color in the scene anyhow. So I'll go ahead and do project dream texture. And to have this work best, you want to make the geometry you're projecting the dream texture or the geometry you're projecting the image the AI will come up with. You want to have that as big as possible in your viewport because it is working off of that. So I'll go ahead and hit start. And we see that it's working. I'll switch over to material preview so we can see what the AI is working on. And we see right now that it's still starting. The first time you run it, it's going to take a little bit longer than the subsequent times you do so. And there we go. All right, so it's kind of creating this landscape over it, and it's applying it to these cells, but it's not quite the shot I'm looking for. It is looking sort of like an aerial view. So I'll go ahead and switch it over to be a top view. Let's see if that wording for it improves the way that it projects onto it. If not, I'll just go ahead and project at an angle, see how that starts to work. Oh, I had to select the faces that I wanted to apply this to, so let's go ahead and select more faces. And if you're wondering why it's applying to others that I have selected, is because they're all part of the same object. So therefore, it'll apply them to those faces as well, simply because they're part of the same object, but it's not quite mapped or projected as it should or as it is to the initial one. So, okay, there we see a few more options being generated throughout different ones. And I'll kind of turn into an angle and see that, you know, save for the fact that there's a sky in there, they are pretty usable. So I'll go back to my camera view and zoom in enough, more or less from that angle. See if I can't fill it in from this angle so that it makes sense with the perspective that I ultimately want to use from the camera. Okay, that doesn't quite resemble what I'd like it to, but I can go into UV editing and see what that image looks like. So it looks like it's using the geometry that I have set up quite literally. So what I'll go ahead and do is select these cells and I'll start placing some of these geometries into them from the materials panel. So as you can see, we have all the different materials or the different images that were projected onto this. So I can hit assign from any one of the previous. And we see that it's projected from the view of the camera. So I could use different ones in different scenarios. So down here, for example, I'll use this one. For these other ones, I'll use a different one. And so on and so forth, kind of just switching it up so that there's different content in each one. I'm not going to use that last one I came up with. Instead, I can go into UV with that face selected and change how that is being projected there so that I can include some of what's seen in that view. All right. Okay. Now, to show you how this can work in combination with the render, since the other cells are further into the background, I'll go ahead and now use these to generate a different image, but I will separate them from the main object so I don't have to go in and UV edit each one individually. Oops. There we are. So I could just right click and do separate by selection. So now they're part of their own object. Hit tab out of that main object, hit tab again to get into this one, hit A to select all of those faces. When I go back to an aerial view, I'll project a different face on a different image onto these. So I'll do another top view, and instead of doing dark purple mountains with heavy lakes, I'll go ahead and do we'll start by putting modern city neon lights, dystopic architecture. All right. And we'll see how that does. So we'll go ahead and run the dream texture onto these cells, see what we can do. All right, so we start getting what looks like the facade of a building. I'll go into the UV and we see, and yep, that's actually the facade to a building. I think there has to be a bit more information in for the model. So what I'll actually do is select all of these, hit tab, and then right click, separate by loose parts, so that I'm now actually able to use all of these as separate objects. And I'll tab Control R into edit mode so I can add some loop cuts and just start selecting some of these faces and start pushing them up. So I start to create a bit more depth in these models, a bit more information for the AI to go off of, because it is using a depth map after all. So we'll use these faces to extrude, go on to, well, I can select all of them and they can remain their own object, but I can just edit them all together at the same time. And I'll just kind of keep doing some loop cuts to introduce some depth into the model. And work all of this from the camera view. So there we go. Okay. Just creating some loop cuts. Not gonna get too complex with it. Just gonna do 2 cuts in each axis for each one and then start pushing and pulling some different surfaces. Since dream textures will actually use this depth created, all these different surfaces, to generate images over these. So introduce some variation into these, maybe some a little bit tighter than others, some a bit more loose. There we go. Okay. Now I can start selecting these and extrude them up, extrude them down, just kind of create some different heights. These ones in the background I'm less worried about. I can have them actually come up taller or come down. That one didn't have any cuts, but it should. There we go. Whoop. So the way I've had success with this before also has been to mimic the massing of a building, specifically have the massing match the architecture style that I end up using. There's a video that I posted. I'll share it here to YouTube as well, but it's basically 250 frames where each image is unique, and that was generated through this process. And the way I did that was it was just basically a massing for the bottom of the building and a rectangle for the tower portion. And that allowed me to essentially project what was just a condominium, your general, just tower design that you typically see in dense cities now. And I created with the same prompt, simply different variations of the same idea onto each one of the different buildings, but then had the render pass at the end do a different style to each one of the frames as the camera moved over these towers. So in essence, I ended up with an animation with 250 frames, each one of the unique image of a camera flyover of a city where each building had a texture created uniquely from this AI, and then each frame was a unique image also generated by the AI over that same scene. All right. So now that I kind of have some good variation going here and it's starting to look like a city, well, not even a city, it's just an aggregation of boxes, which I guess is something that you could define as a city. Cool. And I'll just do a couple cuts here as well. And I'm happy with that. A bit more density in the center and larger volumes towards the outskirts. All right. Just a couple here in the corner. Oh, that's an interesting result. Kind of twisting an edge rather than extruding a face. There we go. Okay, so now I can go ahead and hit A to select all of these faces that are in view of the camera. And I'll actually create more steps for this final one. And I'll change my prompt a little bit to include elements that I had before, which is a modern city resembling a motherboard. And I'll introduce another thing, ambient lighting. So I can have that built into the textures. So I'll go ahead and hit project dream texture. And there we go, working its magic. Okay, so it actually did a straight on view of a building and is projecting that over all the boxes, which isn't quite what I want. So I'll switch over to photograph and see if putting here as a photograph, doing a long shot, aerial view, cinematic, fast shutter speed, photograph, and ambient lighting here, or let's do lit from above. Let's see if using the photograph prompt style will yield better results in the concept art, as it has sort of slots to define that it is, an aerial view or an overhead view. So it's still kind of doing, if I go over to see the image, it's still doing a straight on view. So I have to solve for that with the prompt. I'll go ahead and add in specifically that I want let's say a helicopter shot. Helicopter camera view. It's coming up with different ways that I can word what it is that I'm looking for. I'll select only the faces in the frame this time. Oop. There we go. And project once more. Maybe actually at this time when I'm getting these other images generated, I could actually select it to depth and color. Let's see what we can get with that. All right, it still keeps doing a flat image and applying it to all the faces. So what I'll do instead is see what happens if I do one by one. So if I go ahead and go over to this one, an entire projected city onto this one mass. Okay, that's a little bit better. So the less amount of faces that you use, typically, I think the better this is going to actually turn out. Because further away from camera, that actually looks pretty dang good. So we'll go ahead and zoom in here and do quite a few. So we'll give each one of these different cells with different volumes a different texture projected by Dream Textures. And they're looking quite similar. So I might want to switch up the prompt between them. Or I can also... Ooh, that didn't work. I'll hit the button again, see what happens. That's better. Still not quite what I'd like to see. So I'll kind of move around and zoom in. I don't hate the single image with the neon streaks projected over different surfaces either. That's looking quite cool. So I'm hoping it picks that up as it's projecting this. That's pretty surreal. Okay. Let's see if it does. So let's see if those neon streaks, when I have it on depth and color, actually influence it in some way. And I'll go ahead and change from Euler Ancestral Discrete. We'll change to DDPM. We'll use a different scheduler for this one just to get some different results. And the way that it previews with a different scheduler will be different across the different schedulers. So you'll see like Euler Ancestral, you actually see like a quick progression of all those cells happening, whereas here they kind of fade out. I don't see these working as well with the prompt I've selected. I'll try Euler Discrete. Okay. It does seem like the neon streaks affected in some way, maybe just in the color, not necessarily in its position. So we'll keep working at this from the camera view. I'll select this cell now and zoom in. Let's change the prompt a little bit. Instead of a modern city resembling a motherboard, we'll just do Tron-like city. It'll be similar, but I'd like to see what kind of differences we get from the prompt that was previously put in. So we'll see. Also, the noise strength here, it kind of determines how much of the original image to keep. So we're kind of keeping 25% of the underlying image on this one. I'm really not liking any other scheduler besides the one I started off using. It seems like for architectural things or for environments and photography, Euler Ancestral seems to be working best. And also the most entertaining to watch work, honestly. Yeah. That's pretty cool. All right, we'll keep going. So like this one, I'd like to see what happens if I try to do 2 at a time, 3 at a time. As we said, like the less amount of faces you do this on, the better. But I would like to see, I'm going to actually rotate that one 90 degrees so it's not as identical to the other one. Set origin to center of mass, 180. Move into place. All right. This one's just a flat one. This is a good chance to try out these 4 together. Since these 2 are flat, this one only has a few faces, and that one doesn't have too many either. Or this one is actually because I didn't extrude it at all. So let's give it some depth. Let's see what kind of results we get here when we do 4 of these cells together. So it should be roughly about, I don't know, 20, 26 faces. Okay. Not mad at that. I'm going to keep these 2 as sort of neighbors, keep them the same, but I'm going to change these 2 in the front, or maybe just the one on the right, and keep that sort of like a plaza looking thing. So yeah, city planning with AI. All right, that's still sort of boring. I'm going to add in some cuts. Let's see what happens if I add some cuts, but I don't actually push or pull any of them. Let's see if it does, if that influences any difference at all whatsoever. or if it still treats it as a single surface. It looks like it still treats it as a singular surface. So what happens if I just add slight depth to it? Will it be sort of like sectioned out, like different rooftops altogether? Yeah, a little bit, right? It got some like edge lighting on this one where there was a bigger difference. This is, I mean, I'm not even, there's no lighting in this scene, by the way. This is all just images. All the lighting that you're seeing is just baked into uh, these objects. Which now that I'm starting to see buildings, these streaks are actually starting to look like sort of digital streets. So I'm gonna leave some of these alone, like as it is, because it's looking really cool. So if I go and do this cell, I'll actually only select some of the faces where I want to apply the AI, and I'll zoom in quite a bit. And let's change the prompt again a little bit. Still in line with the concept, but just choosing different words. So rather than a Tron city, helicopter camera view, instead of Tron-like city, we'll do futuristic Tokyo. Let's see what we get here. And I'll hit project dream texture. Okay, kind of basic. Let's see what we can get over an entire cell block with that prompt. And if you have any ideas for those watching for a prompt I could type in, feel free to add that into the chat. And, you know, there's quite a bit of cells to get through still, so if you'd like to type something in, I'll go ahead and copy that in. Make this a collaborative effort. So for this, we could do, I'll reduce the amount of steps. Let's see what happens if I just try to make it a bit more basic looking or less refined. Yeah, it seems like when we just have a box, it doesn't get quite interesting as when we add even just a little bit of cuts and just a little bit of push-pull. What I'll do actually with this one is do a bit different. I'm going to grab some of the corners and just move those to create some angles. All in the sake of an experiment here. Yeah. Cool. Let's see what that does. I mean, it'll distort the image, but I'm curious to see how that portion of the image will look as compared to the rest. See, like, even when it does a box with the angles now, it looks way more interesting. Cool. Go to the overall view now. I'm only going to do a couple more. I feel like I love the streak over here at the top. I'm going to even move the camera a bit higher up so that it's not right on the edge for that. And let's maybe just do this one back here. I'll even do it all the way out here. Like not zoom in that much in the geometries and see what happens between this one and this one. And I did have a thing back here that said, no, dystopic architecture. I'll just add in super high detail. Let's see if not just high detail is good enough. We want super high detail. Let's see what kind of variation that creates, if it helps at all with the fact that the camera is really far away. And no, it doesn't. It actually created some streaks like that too. So it might be that the high detail prompt is actually forcing it to do like a front view of a facade. Nope. Or it does definitely do a facade view, but you know, I'm cool with that. Windows on the roof. That looks the most photoreal out of all the things that it's generated so far. I love how this one has like, it looks like it's like pushed in, even though it's just a face at the top. And by the way, just a little added nugget of value here is that if you're familiar with Ian Hubert's method, now we can actually begin to add cuts here to the model according to the AI image generated. and actually start to push and pull those faces. So I can actually now select this thing and push it in. All right, so it just adds to the sort of level of, you know, realism that it has, you know, once you kind of look away, or if I were to shine a light on here, the geometry starts to match the image on it, right? So if I go into rendered view, we actually see if I move this light around, it's just adding that extra little bit of visual information for when we do our final pass. Now that we go into render view, we actually see we have no lights, right? Which is going to be an issue at the time of rendering. Yep, I'm going to save. Sci-fi city. What I'll do to add some lights in, and I wish it would have been, I wish I could have done this from the beginning. No, there's really no way to have done this from the beginning. I'd have to now go, if I want each one to be self-lit, I'd have to go into the shader editor for each one, go over here and just plug in the image that's being used for the texture into emission and bump up the strength for it. Possibly even add a, what is it, a contrast, brightness contrast pass. So if I add that in, I am in rendered view, aren't I? Yes. So what's going on here? Emissions on black. What am I missing here? I'm adding rendered view color into emission. Let's go. Light up. Huh. Maybe it's because I don't have bloom on, or because I'm using Eevee. If I switch over to cycles and I use my GPU render, I'm going to save in case I crash. That tends to happen. Oh, that's right. I have a whole bunch of materials. So I need to find out what material am I using here, which looks like it's this one. So because I've done this repeatedly over and over, I have a bunch of images, as you can see here on the right, a bunch of images for the same object. So I have to select the right image and start plugging that one into emission. There we go. And it starts to light itself up. So if I add a brightness contrast node here, and I up the contrast, we're only getting light from some of those areas. Actually not loving the result. It's taking away quite a bit from the quality of the image. So I'll leave it as it is. No emission. So what that means is I need to introduce some light into the scene. So the way I'll do that is I'll just add one big light and underlight this entire scene. I'll go Shift A, add an area light, rotate it so that it faces up, make it big enough. As you can see, that rectangle gets big enough to fill the entire screen. And then turn up its power. And lower this down so we can see this properly. Okay. I'll add in a few zeros here. There we go. And then I can make it a really harsh light coming from underneath, or I can make it a really bright light. I think I do want to have this underlight effect be a bit softer and kind of color it a little bit, maybe purple. There we go. You make it one tad brighter and more spread out. And then I'll duplicate it, move it up, rotate it so that it faces down, and then lower its intensity quite a bit. Not that much. Maybe add back 1 0 or another 0. Nice. Maybe this one, instead of purple, could take on, I kind of like the purple. Oh, the blue is nice. Purple and blue with everything else going on. So that adds a bit of a soft light to it. That just kind of reveals, you can actually, just because of the contrast of the built-in images onto the models, it actually looks like it's self-lit already, like the glow is built into the model and all that. So I'm going to keep it there. The only thing is now, in order to prep for the final pass to use the AI, I got to go over here and switch it over to a 512 by 512 format so that I have a square, which is what the AI likes to use. I'll split this off so that I have, there we go. My two ways of working, so I can see the 3D view over here. Maybe make it a bit more wide angle so I can catch a bit more of the scene. Rotate it down so I don't get any of that empty space. Nice. Maybe zoom back in some and move back again. A little bit of finessing here for the composition. And there we go. I like that. Okay, so we'll turn off this render preview, go back into solid, and this is where we now set up the render view for using the AI. So over here, my render properties, I have cycles already set up. For max samples, you know, I can turn it down to 500. We don't need that much. I will turn off the denoiser, because I figured that running the denoiser as a final pass on the render and doing the AI is a bit much and also self-defeating. Go ahead and use some tiling. So I'm actually, I'll do 512 for the tiling, just to keep it into one single tile that's the same size as the render. And then dream textures. So I want to enable that here. And I'll use the depth model as well, so I can use both color and depth. So this way, it'll use the images that I've projected onto the model. A lot of them are going to get overridden, right? They're going to go away. But it's going to use all that color information to feed into the final render, and I can change that intensity of how much it's going to override it with this noise strength value. And I'll switch over to, I was using photography, right? I'm going to go ahead and use the same parameters that I was using for the textures. So I'll copy that prompt. We're using long shot, aerial view, cinematic, fast shutter, photography, and lit from above. So Control A, Control C, hide that away. Bring in that prompt down here. And we're doing long shot. We're doing an aerial view. We're doing cinematic. And we're doing a fast shutter speed. We're doing a photograph with ambient light. Did I do ambient light? I think I might have done something else, but let's just do lit from above, lit from below. Let's try lit from below, since I did light the scene from below and from above. But let's see what happens if I just specify that for the first pass. So hopefully I don't crash this time around. I did create a lot of images. So hopefully it doesn't bog down the render. And I set my samples in the wrong place, so I used 4,000 something samples. So there's my render. And now I can click over here to see the dream texture result. Okay, well that is not as interesting. I mean, it brought it all together, right? It all looks cohesive rather than so chaotic or so different as it looked at before. But let's try this again and turn down this noise strength. So it's at 0.75. Let's try it on the other end, right? We'll do 0.25. Render image. And we'll look at the dream texture result. It's actually working really fast. So it looks like it's taking the original image and distorting it quite a bit. I wonder if the subject matter isn't good enough for photograph, or not good enough, but it doesn't align with photograph anymore. If it's more of a concept art piece now, I may want to switch over to that. But let's just keep playing with the noise strength value. Whoops, I hit render animation. That's not good. I want to stop that after the first one. But let's see. Oh, see, it already went past. And it looked cool, but let's see if by just not changing anything, Because I hit render animation, so it did one image and then went straight to do the next one. So now I gotta cancel, and I canceled sort of the wrong way, so now it's freezing up a bit as it's canceling. But I mean, yeah, you can. I've been at this for not that long, and what, 40 minutes or something like that, not even. And I'm ready to kind of just spit out a whole bunch of different images as concepts off of just this one scene setup using this AI. So really, really efficient just to get out some ideas out. And again, as I showed, like you can end up using those images to then project over the scene again and start developing your model based on the AI generated images. I had saved just before I started doing the renders, so I'm considering closing this out. Give it one more. Oops, I opened the file there. I didn't mean to. I'll just go ahead and close out of it. I gave it a chance. And we'll just reopen. Okay. Back in and ready to hit render again. Open the file I accidentally opened earlier. Here we go. Sci-fi city. Don't save that. Okay. We'll hit render again. I'll change that to 0.6 so we can actually see render image. A lot of misclicks over here. Oh, don't tell me I lost the textures. This has happened to me before where it doesn't quite save all those images when it crashes. And now my scene is boring. Lost into the ether. Let's see if I can recover with the autosave file. Oh, that's not it. Here we go. Sci-fi. Yeah, I think I might have just lost all that work, which happens sometimes. And assign. Yep. So I have a bunch of the images. I didn't lose everything, but it seems like I lost quite a bit of them. So they're all turning black over here. I don't think they saved. Open recent, sci-fi city, don't save. Yep. So now it's only seen in the recording. I'll go ahead and switch this over to concept art anyway, just to see what the result will be by using the concept art prompt rather than the photograph prompt. And I guess I gotta dial this back up all the way up to 0.9, let's say. Let's try that now. Because now there's not as much information to be used for the render, since we took away all those textures. Okay. It's sticking too much to the color results, so I'll just take color away. Let's only use the depth data. And here we go. All right. Now that's something. So yeah, color and depth can be very sort of limiting if you stick to just having a blank scene like I do now. But we're seeing here now with just the depth and the composition of the scene. I wonder if I put this side by side, how well does it match, you know, the blocks that I have in the scene? I mean, it does match pretty well. I mean, it's reading up on where there's more density and where there's larger volumes, where there's only like some rectangles. So it is quite reading a bit. Let's switch it over from that into, rather than sci-fi, cyberpunk, or we'll try cinematic afterward and see what the different results are with the different styles. Oh, good place to end this video on would be, yeah, very cool. good place to end this video would be to set up an animation. So if I go over here to my timeline and I move this up, we're on the first frame. So as I've explained in previous videos, any property that you see over here on the right that has a dot on the right hand side, you can keyframe. So you can have it switch between, frames. So at 0 or at 1, we'll have everything that's set in parameters over here on the right. But if I keyframe environment and cyberpunk, right, and then I go over to frame, let's skip a few frames. Let's say if I go to frame 5 and I change, I'll keep environment. Actually, that's not something I want to change, but I switch it over to sci-fi and then keyframe that. And then I go over 10 frames and I switch from sci-fi to cyberpunk and then keyframe that. And then go 5 frames over and switch from cyberpunk to cinematic and keyframe that. And we end our animation at frame 20. So that's 20 images using the different styles. And just to make it a bit more interesting, I'll also keyframe the camera position. So if I select my camera, go to frame 0, go to the location of the camera, and keyframe its rotation and its position. And I'm just going to move it. I'm going to move over to keyframe number 20, move it down, and rotate it back up. So we look at the city and keyframe those new positions. And we just have these real simple camera motion, right? For 20 frames. And now what I'll do is set up a place for my renders to save. Oh, let's check out the temp file. I'll do that after the stream, but in the temp file, it might have saved all of those renders in the temp folder. It might have saved all those renders that I did before the crash. So I might be able to salvage those, and when I edit this video down, sort of show all those different results together. But for now, oh, there's some of them, yeah. It seems like there's only 2 in there and only 1 from today. So it's probably just the last one. I'll go over into, say, my desktop folder where I'm temporarily holding a lot of this stuff. And I do sci-fi city tests. And open up in here. I don't know why I added that in. Okay. And we'll save into that folder our animation. And I'll go ahead and hit render animation. And it's just going to run through each one of those frames as the camera moves and apply different prompts to each one. So if I open up that folder from my desktop, oh, well, for now, it's not saving the dream texture variation, I think, because I had to set it to that in order for, oh, no, got to stop the animation. I'm missing a crucial step. So the reason I'm keep having to switch over to the dream textures, and in order to avoid that, so you can just automatically use the AI image, you got to come over to compositing, use nodes, and then when you start using nodes, the composite is what gets exported and saved. So what we want to do is, rather than using our raw image, we want to use the image generated by dream textures. There we go. So now that will output what it's meant to. So we'll hit render animation, there it was. And we'll check out here how it starts replacing the frames of the regular scene with these new frames. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this part 2, quite much longer than part 1. So part 1 was kind of just introducing the plugin and what the potentials are with this plugin. And in this part, we really explored how this plugin works with the depth model in the 3D scene, applying this to different volumetrics. And we do see that it's actually, like, when you tweak the settings and you start to understand what the different settings for this plugin do and how it relates to the behavior of the AI, you get quite a bit of control over the outcome, right? So this is a real, I mean, I'll say effortless, but I mean, in reality, coming up with all these different concepts quite quickly, from just putting in a prompt, setting up a quick scene, and then being able to come up with all these different styles, all these different variations within the same file, right? They're just hitting render many times, and in this case, I'm even just putting out an animation and getting out all these creative ideas that I can now take back into 3D and use these for inspiration to generate more models. And a lot of it you gotta kind of rationalize yourself. Like when you look at it from far away, you're like, okay, yeah, that's sort of a futuristic city with some lights, some storefronts and glass, and looks like some streets and whatnot. But when you start zooming in, you realize yeah, it's kind of a mess, or it's not quite. It like resembles something from somewhere, but it's not quite articulated enough to actually be an object. So that's where your creativity can kick in and fill in the gaps. And at the end of the day, this is just another tool. At least how I see it today, it can be used as a tool for inspiration and idea generation, and really filtering out bad ideas early on in the process. So you can see, like, I really like this one actually. The way it even adds like some ambient lights in the background. I think I'm still using like the underlit, or no, we're not even doing the photography prompt, so there's really no lighting cue. See like how it adds for this one a glow all around the streets, and you actually see it affecting the buildings depending on where they're positioned. You don't see it happening on the rooftops where they wouldn't be getting hit from light. So yeah, as you can see, I'm getting quite a bit to work with here. So we're almost at image 20. So it's kind of small, just seen over here. But if we compare the initial 3D scene over here on the left, so this is what I fed the renderer, which is just a bunch of blocks with some light underneath. And I can cycle through it. We could see what the AI is outputting as a final render pass. So it's a shame that crash there had us lose all the projected textures onto this one. But again, it's just a matter of hitting A and hitting project dream texture over here. And we could start playing with those ideas again, right? Thanks for joining. I'm going to wrap it there. And you can watch the replay on YouTube if you want to see the full process again. But yeah, I mean, this is a real cool way to start workshopping some ideas using this AI and using the animation feature to automatically spit out a bunch of different iterations of the same thread. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you for the next stream. Have a good one.